I would approach the achievements of the SLD. I think for any security meetings, obviously this is not, if you like, similar to negotiations, whether bilateral or multilateral. It's not as if you enter it and you have the outcome of settled solutions. I mean, that's not the reason for it, and that would be a very high bar. So with that aside, I think the first measurement would be, were real issues debated? You kind of go for a meeting and everybody says the same thing, but they don't really deal with it. And I think from that perspective, Shangri-La Dialogue this year's 2024 has succeeded. It brought out the issues, the tensions in the South China Sea as graphically and as a high level as you can imagine. There was a hypothetical question of what happens if there are deaths in Thomas Shoal and what would the reactions be, and you saw that being played out. So that was very real. Nobody would say that, well, you're skirting around the issue. It brought out the issue of Taiwan at length. You heard Dong Jin's, Dong Buzhang's reply. China gave its clear stance as well questions about Taiwan and what it means and what it does. We dealt with the issue in the Middle East, and you've heard Indonesia's President-elect Prabowo give his plans, as well as Defense Minister Muhammad Khalid about his views. So I think that was touched on. Ukraine, no lack of European representation. So whether it was at Shangri-La Dialogue or ministerial lunch, and of course, top of it all, President Zelensky personally here, giving his views, answering questions. So yes, I think this year's was quite successful from uncovering and bringing to the fore these issues. If it weren't for this, most of the times, most of us would just read and say, oh, okay, I know it. But I would venture to guess that somebody attending the Shangri-La Dialogue goes away with it with what we call a much deeper feel. It's as if you not only look at the clay, you actually put your hand in it and you can feel it and you can see how hard it is or whether you can mold it or not. So from that point of view, it's been successful.
From Southern Weekly China, and my question is, this is the first time for China's Defense Minister Dong Jun to come to the Shangri-La Dialogue, and do you have any comment on his speech this morning?
I enjoyed my meeting with Dong Buzhang, and I thought we got on very well. I hosted him dinner. He did his introductory visit. We had our Defense Ministers Dialogue, and I think we made good progress in agreeing that we will step up exchanges between our services, land, sea, and to attend. I thanked him for Pa Yi's aerobatic team doing our air show, and for us being able to attend the Zhuhai air show as well. So from a bilateral point of view, I think very productive, and I hope to continue working with him. I think his speech was very clear. I think he articulated China's point of view. He had many questions fielded at him after the speech, and this is in the nature of things. Not everybody would agree with his replies, but at least he replied. I think I'm guessing, but I think he would have preferred maybe another half an hour to reply, because these issues are complex. But Shangri-La Dialogue being what it is, sometimes you're asked to reply to complex issue not in 10 minutes, but in 2 minutes. So I suspect that over time, if he continues to attend the Shangri-La Dialogue, he'll become very good at it.
This is Eileen from Zhao Bao. So what's your personal assessment of Minister Dong Jun? And because China has like 3 defense ministers over 3 years, so what does it mean for Singapore?
It's not par for the course for defense ministers to make public pronouncements and assessments of other defense ministers. So that's not quite what I will do. Yes, I've worked with, probably more than 3 defense ministers. I've been in this portfolio quite some time. I think the first Chinese defense minister I met was Minister Zhao, I think. And he was a Soviet specialist, so he had, I was told his 酒量非常好, Soviet trained. They're all very competent. In the Chinese system, you don't rise to the top if you don't have the capability that you're able to command forces is a given. Because you have a standing army of previously maybe more than 1 million, maybe even 2 million now, still 1 million strong, 1+ million. He said Eastern Command, Southern Command, so plenty of experience. So each defense minister gains his own respect, and I've always respected their ability to understand the issues, to be able to handle what is good for their country, as yet at the same time find space to accommodate, if they can, the needs of other countries. So as I said, I think I look forward to working with him. I find him somebody I think that we can do business with. And I hope that we'll see him again for many years to come.
Hi, Dr. Ng. I'm Natasha here from CNE Digital. Could you share how the ministers at the round table felt about President Zelensky's speech? And also, how significant has Singapore's role as host, convener, and even mediator been, given that President Zelensky has shown up here in person?
Just the second part again, how?
How significant has Singapore's role as host, convener, and even mediator been, given that President Zelensky has shown up here in person?
Co-convener and mediator? Mediator for?
Any of the discussions that have happened here in SLD.
I think we're all thrilled that President Zelensky is here. I mean, we all know he's fighting a war. And to put great enough priority to be here in Shangri-La Dialogue honors us, surely. And as you know, the reception when he came to the hotel and into the room and the applause he got, there's deep felt admiration for his leadership and for the people of Ukraine. I mean, at the ministerial lunch, there was just a litany of praises for the same, how resilient and how innovative the people of Ukraine are, and how, for all defense ministers, we don't wish it, but if ever our own country and populations were under such duress, that we would find that same resolve and never say die attitude to win against the odds. Because this is a classic David against Goliath story. Very few expected Ukraine to hold out against the juggernaut military that the Russian military is. And yet not only they've withstood 1-2 weeks, third year into their struggle, and as I said in the session, Singapore stands completely in support of them in principle and in practice where we can. And as I said, we came out very, very early, a few days after the invasion, to condemn it. And we imposed sanctions on our Russian banks and other entities. Because, why? Because if it's not safe for independent countries that your borders can be violated, then no one is safe, let alone small Singapore. So that for us is an inviolate principle. We are happy that he was here, but we have not asked to be mediator for anything. We're happy to have the Defense Minister Umarov share what they've gone through, and as defense ministers, we are wanting to learn about what they are learning. How do you, for example, fight a drone war, which now they are ahead of most countries because they are producing their own drones and they are facing drones. So I think in terms of military matters. This is the battle that has used unmanned aircraft, drones particularly, which has now cemented the role of that in battlefield tactics and strategy. I mean, so there are a lot of things that we can learn, but I would just end there in saying that we are honored by their presence, and as I wish President Zelensky for his health and the health of the Ukraine people, and I hope that justice and international rules will prevail.
Alfred from Bloomberg News. Is Singapore going to attend peace conference in Switzerland? Thanks.
That's in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think they're considering, I'm sure, so I can't give an answer to that. But in principle, I don't see any reason not to. But again, it's up to MFA and Prime Minister to decide.
Hello, Minister. You have participated in the Shangri-La Dialogue and the Beijing Xiangshan Forum. In today's context, what do you think the characteristics of the two forums? Thank you.
That's a very useful question. I said it in open. I mean, I think, was it last year or a couple of years ago, a gentleman from the PLA, he felt that we weren't quite being fair to the China in this Shangri-La Dialogue. And I explained to him that it wasn't fair or unfair, but, Singapore has had longer experience attending international conferences. And I've had the privilege of attending many conferences around the world, in Bahrain with a different culture. Of course, you can imagine it's a more Arabic culture. Xiangshan Forum in Munich Security Dialogue, German transatlantic, the Nat Marie, which is Baltic states in America. And you've asked to compare and contrast. It's almost like teaching systems. I've been Minister of Education before, and I've looked at different schools. You go to a school in China and you go to a school in Europe, it's different. And you sort of ask which is the better system. Not quite the right question. They teach differently. A school in China is different from a school in Japan. I've attended both. So for the Xiangshan Forum, as I said to them, I think it reflects a bit of culture. Things are a bit more scripted. Questions sometimes tend to be a bit more polite. They don't sometimes ask what they really want to ask. 好像没有礼貌 if you do that. So like Asians will say, 我给你面子, I don't want to ask you in public, I'll ask you in private. Whereas for Western-based media meetings, it's full on. You're supposed to ask these questions in public. But I would say this. I think the Chinese representatives have learned, and that's a very good development. And so if you looked at what's happened in the last few years, every time there's a speech, so for example, from 2 years ago and even on Friday night when President Marcos gave his speech, the PLA representatives had already arranged for their own meetings with the media. They called the media to go, and I noticed that they set up in a nice greenery. It's supposed to soften the image, and then they get to give their views, and I think that's very healthy. In other words, this is called the Socratic discourse. Never avoiding questions, but allowing each, even if the questions are uncomfortable, of course you have to be, you have to do it in a diplomatic way. You can be rude. You don't have to be rude. You can be direct and yet not be rude, and that's an art. But yet, that is a better way than not asking the question. Because when you don't ask the question, it's not as if the problem will solve itself. And psychologists say that, you have to unearth it. You have to go down to what the real tension is before you can deal with it. Because if you don't scrub the onion layers, you don't come to the core of it, it basically gets buried again. So I thought good questions were being asked. I mean, you remember the difficult questions that were asked of your minister. Why is it that China says this thing but does something else? And the question was asked politely. And I wish your minister had a longer time to be fair to him. He was asked many, many difficult questions, and he handled them as best as he could in the time that was given. So if I would give any advice, I think that the more interactive, the more that participants of a security conference feel that the issues are being robustly discussed, that to us is, by international standards, the way you judge whether a meeting is successful or not.
Minister, I'm Siti from Kyodo News, Japan. I just wanted to ask you, with the escalation of great power rivalry and contestation between China and US, so can you give us a sense of how Singapore and other countries attending this meeting are coping and adjusting to the increasing complexity and complication of balancing between these two powers?
Well, I slightly have a different view. I don't think a small country can balance big powers. It's an aspiration, a hope, but it's put to the test when either one or both powers exert pressure on you and you have a breaking point. So that's not our approach. Our approach is really to convince that the powers to be, whether they're big, middle, or otherwise, that is to their collective interest to have a system that protects the rights of large and small powers, and to avoid, and to be inclusive, to avoid military alliances, trade blocs, because then you revert to pre-World War I configurations, that if you're on my bloc, then you're against me, and basically the name of the game is to collect as many people within your bloc so that you fight against another bloc. And we've learned the disaster of that approach. And we watch, you say, your question is how do we watch it? With increasing concern. And that is why we hope that forums like the Shangri-La Dialogue, that's why we continue to, in my speech, encourage both US and China, because as I said, only US and China can deal with the problems in their relationship. They don't need a third party, and I doubt the third party would help. They need to deal with it squarely by themselves, and they need to find a platform that, which I hope what Secretary Austin and President Biden has said, that although there's competition, I don't want confrontation. If they can achieve that, then I think the overall system is stable. It doesn't paper over differences. These differences will last quite long. What is the fundamental difference that one thinks between US and China? It's a political system. One is a democracy. I'm talking about US. One is the democracy, as raucous as they come. One is ruled by the Communist Party of China and will continue to be ruled by it because they have performed so well. So there are bound to be differences. It's not going to go away overnight. So we have to find some level of accommodation, some level of progress despite the differences over the next few decades.
Hi, I'm Geraldine from CNA. So earlier in your plenary address, you actually mentioned that, given that this is the 21st edition of the Shangri-La Dialogue, it's kind of like a coming of age for the dialogue. So I wanted to get your view on, how you think the Shangri-La Dialogue might continue to evolve, especially given the more complex security environment that we see ourselves in, especially this year with multiple conflicts around the world, and as well as Singapore's participation in the dialogue, maybe under you or under your successor.
We've actually done quite well. I mean, objectively speaking, and from the remarks from ministers and participants. Otherwise, they won't come, and they won't be coming in such large numbers. So let's look at the statistics. Right, it started with, I think 12 ministers. I think 21 years ago from few countries. Now you're talking about more than 40 ministers from as many countries. And the level of representation, you've got prime ministers and presidents. We used to sort of adjust one slot for a keynote speaker, and we didn't need any more. But now you have prime ministers and presidents coming in, you need special sessions. And that's a good problem. Dinner arrangements was easier because you didn't have so many heads of government or heads of state. Now, it's a good problem, not even a problem. It's a good outcome, and they're coming repeatedly. And the fact that President Ramos Horta, the fact that the Prime Minister for Lithuania, the fact that President Zelensky, President-elect Prabowo, they all came, and and I think so. I think yes, coming of age, you would say that this adult. Looks decent, male or female, looks decent, is of robust build, and seems athletic, and with some graceful charm, I hope. So I wish Shangri-La Dialogue many more good years.